All right, you're welcome to the virtual learning on the laying out of pattern on fabric. Now, here I have the pattern we already drafted. I expect it to have this. Then we have the fabric. Now, each of the groups have 5 years of fabric. I expect you not to use more than 2 years of fabrics for constructing the gown. I hope you have not used a very robust model. Then we have the lining here, black color to suit the fabric. Now, the first thing we do is to check the optimal width that is necessary. What do I mean by that? You especially measure on the hip line, that is the fullest part of the body. Here it's about 10 1/4, and you add 2 inches to that for seam allowance. That was what I did here before folding the fabric. So you fold this fabric into 12 1/4, just like you find it here, from top to the end, and you fold the lining into the same measurement. Now this folding is to be the same. If you check at the base, at this other side, you see that the lining is still flowing along the same dimension as the fabric. So you may also have to iron to make sure that you have straight. It's not just because of gator, it's so that the fabric is flat and then there is no error in the calculation of dimensions. Now, from the pattern we have, we'll be pinning it down to the fabric and the lining together because we'll be cutting. Now, remember that when we drafted the front pattern, we add a notation here. This. What does this imply? You should guess it right. This is place on fold. That is why this fabric has been folded into two. The lining as well has been folded into two for the front. So having aligned the fabric and the lining, then we are going to place the pattern. Now, before we pin the pattern, we are going to introduce the allowances. At the shoulder, properly we should give 1 inch of allowance. So that I will be giving an inch rather. So I know I will be pinning at that point. Make sure that your pattern is not too short or too long than the fabric that you have folded. Then we are going to do the pinning from top to bottom. Systematically, you already added 2 inches at the other side of the pattern. Now, at the M line, we will be having an extension for both the folding in and the seam. So here we will be taking 4 inches, and that is where the tailor's chalk comes into play. So I'll be taking 4 inches. Remember, we have the tailor's chalk, which each of you have in your group. So we'll be using the long ruler to map out the 4 inches here and here. 4 inches. So we'll pin that down. Now, before we pin down to the other side, we want to transfer the dart that has been constructed in the pattern to the fabric. So we'll be using the duplicating sheets, the one called carbon paper, and the tracing wheel. The duplication sheet has two sides. A side that is very glossy, that is where much of the ink is, and the other side that is the negative. So you place that other side. Please bear in mind that the fabric was folded to ensure that the wrong side is out. That is where we place the marking. So the dart begins here and ends here. So you just drive the wheel from the start of the dart and follow it carefully to the end. Now, having drawn that on the fabric, the pattern is already showing for the darts, but we would also take that measurement we did for others. 2 inches across all sides. Now for the armhole, we'll be taking in 1 inch there. So here, 1 inch, 1 inch, 1 inch. I hope you can see clearly on the camera where the 1 inch I'm thinking is stopping. So 1 inch, sorry, yeah, it would be 2 inches at the waist, two, somewhere in between, two, at the hip line, originally is two, then up a little, two, 2 inches, yes, 2 inches. Okay, now the dots that we've had, we'll connect them together. So 2 inches ends here. Now the M line is 9 1/4, so it should be here too. Plus 2 inches will be 11 1/4, so somewhere around here. So we will grab our cutting shear, scissors. So we cut out at the points that have been marked. So you are cutting out the fabric and the lining together. Let me continue from the top. Yeah. And finally, we will be taking in at the edge here about half of an inch along the supposed neckline. So half of an inch here. Yeah. Yeah. So before removing the pin, map out the original structure so that you take that to be the same line. So that is the point where the sewing machine will pass through. If you keep the measurements we did already in mind, you should be able to capture that this place at the neckline when I'm marking is around half of an inch, at the shoulder about 1 inch, at the armhole 1 inch, then by the sides is how many inches? If you have been following, 2 inches. Now you see that I cut in the self edge at this end as well. Why? Self edge is the what is called the ATRJ, that point where the machine finishing is done after weaving. That is the point where the fabric is the strongest. The reason why we cut it together is because when the construction is done, it will be aired as part of the seam allowance, so it will not be showing up on the output. So with what we've done here, we've been able to transfer the front block to the fabric, so it has been marked out, including the darts. Then we unpin. So here we have the fabric and the lining for the front block already cut out. Now take again the procedure we followed. First, you measured out from the fabric the dimension of the fullest part at the hip. Then you also take the next step, which is the placing of the fabric pattern, the pattern of the dress on the fabric, taking note of the necessary allowances. That is step 2. After that, the third step is the pinning. You pin appropriately, making sure that there are no creases. Equal pattern you on sórí aṣọ. Then the fourth is for you to map out the that or any other notation that needs to be taken note of. For example, if it is on the sleeve now, we are going to indicate the notch while doing the using the duplicating sheet. Also, after the depiction of that, you take note of the extensions that you will have at the base, that is at the hem line, and then you cut out the fabric. After cutting out, the next step, I think the fifth, is for you to map out the original pattern, which would be the seam line when it's time for construction. And afterwards, you unpin, and then the pattern is laid out.